Visual prompt for audience engagement. If an alien species had never known emotions or affection, how do you think they would react upon discovering human intimacy is based on choice, not necessity? Let us know what you think. Would they be fascinated, horrified, or curious enough to try it themselves? Sayalira of the Zirathal Collective had dissected 322 mammalian species. She had mapped the neurological networks of 7 sapient civilizations and had once reverse-engineered an entire planetary ecosystem after breakfast. She believed she understood life in all its logical forms. Then she met humans. The initial brief had been simple: cultural exchange, limited biological observation, no direct social blending. Observe their rituals. Understand the motivation behind Earth's most unpredictable species. What Salira hadn't expected was contradiction. According to every known model of evolution, reproduction was a mechanical necessity. Efficient, functional, purpose-driven. It happened, the genes passed on, and life continued. Humans, however, introduced something entirely alien. They chose it. Salira's first exposure came through what humans called literature. She assumed these dramatized accounts were exaggerated, fictional abstractions layered in metaphor. So she asked for live observation rights. Her human counterpart, Lieutenant Jacob Mercer, was assigned to her directly. He was a cultural liaison, trained in xenopsychology and fluent in multiple galactic dialects. But mostly, he had a crooked smile and an annoying habit of making jokes she didn't understand. "You're telling me," Salira asked one day, her voice level and precise, "that humans willingly engage in close physical contact without biological imperative?" Jake gave a low laugh. "Not just willingly, enthusiastically, sometimes recklessly." "Why?" He tilted his head. "Because it feels good. Because it connects people. Because we're not machines." Salira recorded the response, but the explanation was insufficient. Over the following weeks, she observed social behaviors: hugs, kisses, hand-holding, dancing. None of it led to direct procreation. All of it had meaning: voluntary connection, emotional risk, trust. It wasn't just strange, it was illogical, and yet compelling. Her superiors expected a report. She gave them data, graphs, hormonal spikes, behavioral comparisons, but none of it explained anything, not really. So she filed an additional request: subjective field integration. "Wait," Jake blinked after reading her formal petition. "You want to participate? With me?" "For purposes of immersion," Salira said carefully. "You are the most accessible and appropriate example of a human in active social dynamics. My interaction with you is frequent, already sanctioned, and you think I'm normal? Statistically average. Yes." He laughed again. She made a note. Subject appears flattered by classification as average. When the request was approved, the ship's AI prompted both parties with a simple note: cross-species immersion approved. Duration open-ended. Emotional boundaries monitored. Salira wasn't nervous. Her species had long since eliminated fear through selective neural dampening. But she did feel a sensation she couldn't yet catalog, like a variable she hadn't accounted for, quietly shifting her internal code. She stood outside Jake's quarters, hand poised to knock. Behind that door wasn't just a subject. It was something far more dangerous to her worldview. It was unpredictability. Salira had knocked on hundreds of containment chamber doors in her life. This was different. Jake's quarters weren't sterile, weren't symmetrical. The lighting was warmer than regulation. Personal items cluttered the surfaces: photos, books, something called a lava lamp that pulsed with oddly soothing red light. No pattern, no structure, just presence. "You sure you want to do this?" Jake asked as she stepped inside. He sounded cautious, not doubtful. It was a subtle distinction, but she noticed. "I do not initiate actions without full consideration," she replied, standing motionless in the center of the room. "The parameters of the experiment have been agreed upon by both parties and the Interspecies Ethics Board." "Right," Jake muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just mean, this isn't one of those things you can quantify easily. Or, treat like a checklist." Salira blinked slowly. "Why not?" Jake opened his mouth, then closed it again. He gave a soft laugh and gestured to the couch. "Okay, let's start small." Small was apparently watching a movie together. Salira sat precisely on one end of the couch, while Jake collapsed into the other, offering her a bowl of air-popped corn kernels saturated in what humans referred to as butter. She scanned the compound, lactose-based, high lipid content, possibly addictive. "I have read that shared media induces a bonding effect in human pairs," she noted. "Not wrong," Jake said, hitting play, "especially with old sci-fi." The film was black and white, primitive effects, implausible physics, but what struck her wasn't the plot. It was Jake. He laughed. He leaned forward. He quoted lines before the characters did. This wasn't just entertainment. This was ritual, shared culture, embedded emotion. At one point, the protagonists embraced and kissed passionately on screen. Salira turned to Jake. "Is that act symbolic or literal?" "Both," he said without looking away. "It's affection, attraction, all the stuff that makes life messy and wonderful." She tilted her head. "Is the act performed because the emotion exists? Or does the emotion form because the act is performed?" That got his attention. He looked at her fully now, a flicker of admiration softening his usual smirk. "You know, I've never thought about it that way. Maybe both. Maybe one feeds the other." He didn't say anything more, and neither did she. Later, when he walked her back to her assigned quarters, he didn't touch her, didn't push. He simply smiled and said, "Same time tomorrow?" "Yes," she said. And for the first time in her long, data-driven life, she didn't understand why she said it so quickly. That night, alone, she pulled up her internal logs. Her heart rate during the film had fluctuated. Her breathing had deepened. The scent of Jake's presence lingered, illogically vivid. She did not feel changed exactly, but she felt expanded, like someone had opened a door she hadn't realized was locked. In her report, she wrote, "Subject 03, Mercer J., displays high variability in emotional expression. Non-invasive exposure results in persistent after-effects, including increased visual recall, involuntary physiological responses, and unexpected anticipatory behavior. Further observation required." She didn't mention the dreams. They were too abstract for her people to understand. Images of stars seen through unfamiliar eyes. Voices echoing not in language, but in feeling. A sense of reaching. And beneath it all, something terrifying. Desire. Not for information. Not for answers. Salira was not designed to feel this way. Her neural architecture, an evolutionary marvel of the Zirathal, was supposed to prioritize logic, suppress disorder, and eliminate unnecessary emotional drift. Emotions, for her kind, had once been seen as a contaminant, a virus that distracted from progress. But now her thoughts weren't aligning in clean vectors anymore. They curled, wandered, looped back to Jake. She hadn't meant to find him in the observatory dome that evening. It wasn't part of the schedule. But there he was, sitting on the floor, leaning against a crate of unused telescopic lenses, staring into the void beyond the viewport. Stars stretched infinitely above, a field of white against endless dark. Celera stood in silence for a full minute before speaking. "You're off duty." "So are you," Jake replied without turning. "Want to join me?" She hesitated, then sat beside him, close but not touching. He handed her a thermos. The smell was rich, spicy, faintly sweet. "Chai," he said, "not just a drink, a comfort ritual." She sipped. The warmth spread through her, foreign, intimate. "Do you ever wish you didn't know so much?" he asked, after a pause. Celera blinked. "I exist to know." "Yeah, but doesn't knowing too much sometimes get in the way of just being?" She considered. "No," but the answer rang hollow. Jake leaned his head back against the crate. "You know, I was warned about you. They said you'd be cold, clinical, like a walking microscope. But you're not. You're curious. And you feel things, even if you don't have the language for it yet." "That's inaccurate." "Is it?" She opened her mouth to argue, but found she couldn't. Instead, her mind flashed to how her breath caught when he smiled, how her skin reacted when their hands brushed by accident yesterday in the corridor. Was that feeling learned? Or was it something buried, now awakening? "I've begun dreaming," she said quietly. Jake turned toward her, eyes narrowing with interest. "That normal for your kind?" "No. We removed subconscious drift generations ago. Dreams were considered distractions, meaningless simulations." She looked down at her hands. "But now I see things when I'm in standby mode. Images, moments, not from memory, from longing." Jake didn't laugh, didn't interrupt. He just listened. She told him about the dream she had last night, walking beside him through a forest of earth trees, stars dripping from the sky like rain. No mission, no objective, just silence and presence. "I don't understand it," she said. "You're not supposed to," Jake replied gently. "That's the point." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was full. Celera's internal core temperature had risen slightly. Her pulse oscillated unpredictably. She knew what this meant in human terms: a bond, emotional emergence, vulnerability. Dangerous, according to her people. Necessary, according to every part of her that was no longer strictly Zir-Athel. Then Jake shifted, closing the distance between them by a single breath. Not touching, never imposing, but there, present, waiting. She could have pulled away. She should have. Instead, she whispered, "I don't know what comes next." Jake's voice was almost a breath. "That's what makes it real." Later, she stood before the mirror in her assigned quarters, examining her reflection not for biology, but for change. She felt heavier, not in mass, but in meaning, as if her choices had acquired gravity. Her people would see this as failure. She was beginning to see it as evolution. In her next report, she wrote, "Subject 03 displays consistent empathy, patience, and restraint. Researcher has engaged in unsanctioned reflection, internal conflict, and positive emotional drift. Hypothesis: emotional connection is not an inefficiency. It is a stabilizing force, a catalyst, possibly a survival trait." She paused. Then, for the first time, she deleted the rest of the report and let the silence stand in its place. The summons came just after morning rotation. Encrypted. Urgent. Directive class. Celera stared at the communique glowing against her wall interface. The Zir-Athel High Scientific Council had reviewed her latest transmissions, or more precisely, what little remained of them. There had been gaps, deletions, irregularities. They had noticed. "Return immediately. Mission parameters compromised. Emotional contamination confirmed." They called it contamination. a virus of the mind, a deviation from her purpose. Celera stood in silence for a long time. She had once believed in the purity of her mission. Logic over sensation, structure over chaos, observation without immersion. But Earth had altered her, not through force, not through manipulation, through invitation, through Jake. He was waiting in the observatory again. Same crate, same stars, same quiet patience. "You got it, didn't you?" he asked without turning. She nodded. Jake's jaw tensed. "They're calling you back." "Yes." "And you're going." She hesitated. That was answer enough. Silence stretched between them again, but this time it was colder. Jake finally stood, pacing once before turning toward her. "I'm not gonna stop you," he said. "You don't owe me anything. I get it. You have obligations." Celera watched him closely. "I didn't expect it to be difficult." "Then I guess it worked," Jake said. "You got what you came for. You observed emotion, attachment, vulnerability, all the messy human stuff. Now you can write your report and file us away as a case study." She stepped forward. "That's not what I want." Jake met her eyes. "Then what do you want, Celera?" She opened her mouth, and the truth came, unexpected and unfiltered. "I want to stay." Jake didn't move. "I want to understand this," she continued, voice quieter now. "Not as data, not as a hypothesis. I want to be part of it. I want to feel it fully, without restraint, without protocol." "And your people?" he asked. "They will not understand." "Then what happens to you?" She took a breath. It trembled, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I don't know." For the first time in her life, she admitted that without fear. Later, she stood at the edge of the launch bay. One final chance to return home. The Zirathal vessel hovered silently in the airlock, immaculate and waiting. A voice buzzed in her earpiece. "Celera, respond! You are late for extraction." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned, walked back into the corridor, and shut the door behind her. In her final transmission to the Zirathal Council, she sent no data logs, no summaries, just one sentence. "You taught me how to disconnect. Humanity taught me how to belong." Weeks passed. She was given a formal role in Earth's Xenocultural Research Division, an unofficial role in Jake's life. They weren't anything that could be catalogued. Not yet. Not labeled by the algorithms of her homeworld or the bureaucracy of Earth. They simply were. Some nights they sat in silence. Some nights they danced in the kitchen to music she still didn't understand. Some nights she dreamt. One night she asked him, "What am I now?" Jake smiled, pulling her hand to his chest where his heart beat steady and warm. "You're human enough." She let herself believe it. Have you ever felt like you didn't belong? Until you met someone who made you feel seen for the first time? Let us know in the comments. Celera's journey is a reminder that sometimes connection is the bravest act of all. Bravest